Hello, this video is for IXL Activity 7.C.20. It is titled Integer Multiplication and Division Rules. The three-character code for this activity is 5 Romeo 8. And I have a picture of a cowboy town here. And this actually has something to do with the lesson. So in the textbook lesson that I did on this, I discussed a memory device for multiplying positive and negative numbers and also dividing positive and negative numbers, because this is for multiplication and also for division. And we're dealing with multiplying positive and negative numbers. So in that textbook lesson, I talked about the triangle, that if you have a triangle and you put a negative sign in two corners and then put a positive sign in the other corner, you could use this as a memory device or as a little tool, you might say, to remember what the result of multiplying positive and negative numbers are. And that was with this triangle. Well, you already know that a positive times a positive equals a positive. So been doing that for years. However, if you cover it up with your fingers, if you were to cut this thing out or draw it on a piece of paper, and then you were to cover up with your fingers what each of the factors were, like if you had a negative times a negative, well, if you covered both these negatives up, you would see that you have a plus sign there. So that tells you that a negative times a negative equals a positive. And then if you're multiplying a negative times a positive, so if you covered up the negative and the positive, then what would be left to see would be the negative sign. So a negative times a positive equals a negative, and a positive times a negative equals a negative. And the key here is that, like we saw in the textbook, if they are the same signs, positive, positive, then it's going to equal positive, or negative times negative is going to equal positive. And if the signs are different, positive times negative, negative, and negative times positive is a negative. So if those don't help, then got a little story. I've told this story for several years. I started off teaching sixth grade. It was my first year teaching math many years ago, and they taught me a little story in college, and I thought it's kind of interesting. So I've always used that story and referred to it as the cowboy town story. So during westward expansion, whenever all the settlers are moving from the east going to the west, and they'd stop and they'd set up a town. Well, in order to have a town, you need to have people. And so whenever people come to town, that's a good thing. And we'll use plus is coming to town. And coming, and then we'll say negative is when someone is going. So, or leaving. There we go. Let's use the word leaving instead. So plus sign, they're coming to town. Negative sign, leaving town. And back then you had bad guys and you had good guys. So we'll say that a plus sign is a good guy and a negative sign is a bad guy. So if a good guy, multiplying, the good guy comes to town, then that is a positive thing. If a good guy leaves town, well, that's a bad thing. If a bad guy comes to town, then that's a bad thing. But if a bad guy leaves town, then that's a good thing. So I don't know if that'll be helpful any, but I've always kind of thought it was an interesting, humorous type of way to tell it. So good guy comes to town, good thing. Good guy leaves town, bad thing. Bad guy comes to town, bad thing. Bad guy leaves town, good thing. Positive times positive is positive. Negative times negative is positive. So same sign, the answers are positive. But if they're different signs, then the answers are negative. So let me go ahead and erase my story there. Outstanding. And let's go ahead and start looking at the problems. So we have negative divided by negative. So same sign, it's going to be positive, right? If you think of it this way, bad guy is leaving town. That's a positive thing. Here we have a negative and a positive, different signs, so the answer is going to be negative. Negative times positive equals a negative. Here we have a negative divided by a negative, so they're both the same sign, so it's going to be positive. Negative divided by negative is positive. Here we have a positive times a positive. Well, we've known for years that a positive times a positive is a positive, and they are indeed the same sign. Negative times positive, different signs, so the answer is going to be negative. A negative times a positive equals a negative. Here we have a negative times a positive. Well, they're different signs, so the answer is going to be negative. Negative times positive equals negative. Here we have a positive and a negative, so they're different signs. The answer is going to be negative. Here we have a negative and a positive, different signs, so the answer is going to be negative. Negative divided by positive is negative. Here we have a positive and a positive, so they're the same sign. Positive times positive equals positive. And in the next problem, these are the same sign also. They're both negative, but they're the same sign, so the answer is going to be positive because a negative divided by a negative equals a positive. And, well, that was all of them. So, those are all my examples for IXL 7.C.20, where it was integer multiplication and division rules. Is the quotient or the product going to be positive, or is it going to be negative? Don't have to calculate it. You just have to determine and tell what the answer is going to be. Good luck with the activity.